You know him. You know the voice. You know the name. You know who he is. He's been there for you for years. Dave Thompson is the news director with Prairie Public. And those 14 years I served in the legislature, I will tell you that Dave asked a question respectfully, honestly, and quite frankly, many times the one you didn't want to have to answer. He's a tough reporter, and he's somebody who does his job. Dave, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Well, thank you very much, Joel. Appreciate it.
So the big storm that is still going on, interstates closed. People haven't even really dug out yet in many cases. It's April, Dave. It's April. What's going on here? Can't you control this? Don't you have any power?
Not very much, apparently. They put in my order, and I think somehow it got messed up. So.
You look on the screen of some of those snow totals, and you think that they got the first number wrong. You wouldn't think that it would be anywhere near that. But what are the conditions in Bismarck, where you're at right now?
Well, right now the snow is letting up now. It's a lot lighter snow, but the wind is still picked up, and it's blowing the snow into some drifts. As a matter of fact, outside the station this morning, we had a 5-foot drift that basically prevented me from getting to my car pretty much. So I had stayed there the night before, so that wasn't a big deal. But still, you're talking about a 5-foot drift, and it's April, and you got a 5-foot drift of snow.
Well, it isn't as though you haven't done this before, like I said,
that's true.
but that still doesn't make it easy. It doesn't when you're reporting this. What are you hearing from out there? What are you hearing from the ranchers? What are you hearing from the schools? What are you hearing from everybody, Dave?
Well, what I'm hearing from the schools is schools have basically, a lot of them have canceled classes now, and they've probably canceled classes because you've got an Easter break coming up. I've heard that from a couple of the colleges as well. And, they'll come back to school on Monday. In terms of ranchers, it's kind of a mixed bag. Everybody's happy for the moisture because it's been pretty much bone dry out here. But now you've got some moisture. They're thinking about this is good, but it comes during calving season, which is not a good thing. And Joel, I hearken back to what happened 25 years ago, and that whole mess with the ice storms, and that led to the flooding in the Red River Valley. And it was kind of reminiscent of that, because I have a quick anecdote for you. I called a friend of mine who had a 4-wheel drive vehicle on a Saturday night, and normally that's a day off for me. And I said, I need to probably get to the station. Can you get me up there? And if you've ever been in Bismarck, it's pretty hilly. So he got me halfway up 15th Street Hill. He could go no further. I walked the rest of the way, only fell twice, and then got into the station. And I finally got home about Monday night, about 6:30 p.m. So this has been, almost deja vu.
Whatever they're paying you, Dave, it's not enough. The dedication that you have is just amazing to me. In terms of the danger that comes with a big snow in the spring like this, it isn't as though Bismarck and the Missouri River, and of course, upstream when it comes to the Missouri coming down at you, has been, it's flooded before as well.
Yes.
Is there some anxiety that's going along with this with some of the people that don't need it? I always think of some of the elderly in our communities about how they see moisture like this, and then they go back in history, as you just did, back to 97, and they think, oh man, here we go again.
Well, you'd think about the Missouri situation we had in 2011 and 2012, where we had ice jams, we had some, very high flows in the Missouri. And yes, it's the once bitten, twice shy syndrome. You saw that. And now you've got another event that's bringing a lot of moisture to it. And yeah, there's still some nervousness, especially people who have built housing along the river itself. So it bears watching. I haven't heard very much from the Corps of Engineers or anything like that in terms of any particular danger. But then again, we'll still probably be assessing this after the storm is over.
Yeah, I know that Lake Sakakawea, one of the biggest concerns they had was the lack of water. For those people with cabins, they were like, they're letting too much water out of it, for downstream. So, maybe this isn't nearly, I guess this might not be something we have to worry about other than the terrible inconvenience that it has going into what we're looking at with Easter week, which,
Right.
as you pointed out, it doesn't surprise me that the schools are saying, look, go home. We'll talk to you on Monday. By the time you dig out, you could get some of those high schoolers up there on the hill where Prairie Public is and have them shovel out that 5-foot drift because they have time now, David, right?
Hey, now that's a great idea. Maybe I can do something, but who knows if they'll do that. But, that might be kind of interesting. Get them to do some public service,
right.
public service work.
And maybe some people own public service. What better way to do it?
Sure.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the news that, other than the weather that's out there in the state of North Dakota right now. Obviously, we're going into campaign season. There's new districts out there in these legislative districts. We've got new candidates. We've got a Senate race that I know you covered of a gentleman that's on this network with me, Rick Becker, that made a race against John Hoeven. And what's been kind of the backlash on that now that the dust has settled a little bit, has the Hoeven camp and some of the more established traditional Republicans, are they a little afraid? Are they realizing that there's an insurgence out there that could be biting on people's heels?
I would be remiss if I didn't say that, because that's exactly what I'm hearing from some of the more establishment type Republicans. They're a little bit concerned about the fact that the people on the particular side, the Bastiat caucus, have some organizing talent. They've got Jared Hendricks from Minot, for example, who is a very good organizer. And they're a little concerned about what this means down the road. Right now, Rick Becker did not win the nomination, but he got 45% of the delegates to the convention to vote for it. And there was that whole discussion that didn't really come to fruition, but I don't think we've heard the last of it, that maybe the Republicans, from that ilk, want to make sure that, if somebody gets a nomination at the convention, there is no primary challenge. And then there are the Republicans who are saying, why do we have a convention anyway? Let's just do a primary and then have a convention after the primary. So there's a little discussion going on about that at this point.
Well, when you have an off-year election, and by off-year election, I mean a president's name isn't on the ballot, and you
or a governor's name at this point,
or the governor's name. Yeah, that's a great point to make. And you have a race where you're sitting there, looking at in the Republican Party 2,300 plus delegates, a record number of delegates coming to the convention. There's passion out there, and the one thing that I really took away from that convention was that the passion, what came from the Berg camp, that these people maybe didn't have the numbers, but they didn't have the numbers this time. Because when it comes to those districts out there, I know from my home area, the people that attended those local district conventions, they came in with a lot of passion, a lot of energy, so to speak, and things were said that normally wouldn't have been said.
Right, and I honestly believe that a lot of this was also ginned up by the mandates and the restrictions put in place because of COVID-19, and that caused some backlash, and some of that might be fueled by certain media and certain social media too. But yeah, there's some concern about the idea of liberty with this group of people, and I understand that, but yet there's the other side of the argument is, what about the health of people?
Mm-hmm. Well, before you came on, Jamie Smith, candidate for governor in South Dakota, was on, and we were talking about money. How Kristi Noem, I think he said, had 12 million. I might be off $1 million or $2 million, but it's that much that you can be off $1 million or $2 million, and he can't match that. He said, I'm not going to have to match that. But the truth is, when you look at this campaign against John Hoeven, social media played a huge role in that. And you've been covering politics in North Dakota for a long time now. Is it a new day when it comes to how people convey that message? and the tools they have to use and the money they have to spend, Dave.
I often talk about this when I'm asked to talk to service clubs and things like that. Said it is a new world, and it's still kind of a wild, wild west world when it comes to social media. But you have to play in that sphere. And that's why I say we, as a news organization, we have to play in that sphere too. So we have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter presence, things like that. But yeah, this whole idea of reaching people on social media is very interesting, and you have to be in that sphere. You have to be playing in that sphere if you're going to succeed, because that's where a lot of people are getting information, rightly or wrongly. And I'm not going to say it's one or the other, but yeah, you have to play in that sphere.
As a man that completely respects the work of Prairie Public and the history of the nonpartisan delivery of what's going on out there in the news world, I'm curious what your reaction is, because I know that Prairie Public does a great job of covering the East. And many of the people watching us might not have a pulse on what's happening in the East, but going to that passion issue up in Grand Forks, they're mad. They're mad about not knowing about this wet corn mill plant coming into their backyard, and now they're using petitions to send that message out. You go to Castleton, and there's an energy force there, mad because the Japanese group that is bringing in the plant in Castleton, they didn't know about that there. The farmers I talked to last night at the Antelope Creek Bar in Morton, North Dakota, there's my free plug, are mad, and they're mad about how they're being treated by Summit Carbon Solutions, a pipeline that's going through North Dakota to inject carbon into North Dakota's soil. So I have to ask you this, that anger, that energy force, that everywhere I went in talking about these three things, they're mad at the Burgum administration for not communicating with them, and yet kind of sponsoring and going out and encouraging these projects without talking to the people that are affected by these projects. Are you hearing any of that, or is that just the conversation I had in the Antelope Creek Bar?
Actually, I am hearing a lot about that when it comes to things like pipelines. And we talked about pipeline fatigue for years, but now it's hitting parts of the state that probably haven't dealt with pipelines like they have in the Bakken region. But now, yeah, you're hearing that, and people are just a little bit concerned, because a lot of people think that, industry might be running roughshod over them. And I understand that concern. I've heard that from a number of people. And this whole issue of wind farms, Grand Forks County put in a temporary moratorium on wind farms, 90 days, because they're wondering about what should be. Pardon?
No, keep going, Dave.
I was going to say they're wondering about what the setback should be from houses, from occupied dwellings. And there's some talk about making it that you can't have a wind farm or a wind turbine within 1 mile of a residence. So there's a lot of talk about that. And then, of course, when the whole thing happened with the coal plant, Coal Creek Station, McLean County put in a moratorium on wind farms too, because that's one of the things that people are really concerned about. And that was a different reason why they put in that moratorium about wind farms. Yeah. They were trying to protect the Coal Creek Station plant. And apparently that has worked, because Coal Creek will continue in some form, at least for a while. And now they're looking at rescinding that moratorium on wind farms. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of unrest. There's a lot of concern, and a lot of people think, hey, why aren't we being communicated with? Right. And I'm hearing that a lot.
Right. That's what I'm hearing. It isn't like they're jumping up and down against the projects. They just don't like the fact nobody talked to them, and it affects them. So, Dave, I hope you get out of there. I hope that
I'll try.
I hope that they dig out that 5-foot snowbank. So, thanks for coming on with us.
Glad to do it, Joel. Thank you.